Hello, everyone, and welcome at this info session about entrepreneurship to acquisition. It's good to see that there are many people who are interested in the concept, and this info session. In this info session, we want to tell you more about the concept and share with you experiences of people who have actually done it. And also, we'd like to talk a bit about the track that we've set up in the Executive MBA of the Rotterdam School of Management that prepares you for an entrepreneurship to acquisition trajectory. My name is Erik Roelofsen. I'm the Academic Director of the Executive MBA. And with me on this info session are Alexander Schuil and Leonardo Palou. Alexander is still in the car between meetings, but he's kind enough to join and tell you more about this concept in a minute. Alexander has done it himself. He's of Novidam Capital, and he'll introduce himself further in a minute. Leonardo Palou is one of our students in the Global Executive MBA. He's been part of the track this year, and actually is currently an active searcher and active in entrepreneurship to acquisition. So Alexander will give you an introduction about his experience. Leonardo will talk about his experience last year, and I'll close off with some information about the track and what that actually involves. I think at the end of each session, we have a little bit of time to take some questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Alexander.
Okay. Hi guys. I hope you guys can hear me clearly. I'm in the car the next few minutes. Indeed, racing from meeting to meeting, like entrepreneurs do, I'd say. But it's really exciting to see so many people that have joined and interested to listen to this little part of the chat. I'm going to spend the next probably 20 minutes or so describing background, how I got into this, and why you guys should be taking this ETA course. But I guess you've already thought about it and learned a little bit about it since you're on this call. But that's super exciting. So a quick step back. I'm also an Erasmus alum, grew up in the Netherlands, studied business and economics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Not an MBA, but the undergrad and a master's in finance. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I started at the consulting firm McKinsey & Company that you might have heard of. I guess I got kind of lucky to get in there. And since I didn't really know what I was going to do, it helped me see different business problems. Right, McKinsey is a global consulting firm that focuses on different functional areas as well as different industries. So I got to see many business problems. And I think it was a good continued education in the search for what am I going to do next. I think I did always know I wanted to become an entrepreneur, but I didn't really have a golden idea or something like a special startup to go after. So that search has always been with me without finding the perfect thing. In a consulting firm, in this case, and my employer, it was pretty normal to do an MBA after 3 or 4 years in employment. Us Dutch, where I'm originally Dutch, have some second thoughts about that when you already have a master's in finance or business. Like, will the MBA really help me? And I'm sure in your seat, you're thinking, depending on your background, was it something for you? And maybe there are law students in their undergrad that think they want to add some business skills, maybe history students who knows. But if you're a business student and you graduate when you're 24 years old or something, what's the added value when you're there? Is some, and for me it was a lot, because so I went to INSEAD, the business school in France, with another campus in Singapore. Besides meeting many people, growing my network and having a great time, it was also where I learned about my next step, and that's something that's kept me busy for the last 10 years. In this case, search funds. So during a course called Realizing Entrepreneurial Potential in 2013, an American investor came by the French campus and talked about, hey, if you don't have a golden business idea, but you think you're an entrepreneur, or you have entrepreneurial DNA, or you'd like to build something that somebody's already taken from, let's say, 0 to 10, but can we take it from 10 to 100? Please listen. So this sparked my interest, and I opened my ears and listened a little harder. Still thought, well, this all sounds nice and dandy, but it's probably not for me, because I have lots of other stuff to do. I'm trying to win this business plan competition, and I'm not made for these old-fashioned companies. But when it was about the 8th month of the 12-month MBA, I started listening a little better and decided, well, maybe this is interesting. And people started talking about how this really worked. So what is a search fund, right? Young entrepreneurs with, in our opinion, the right background, and there is really no specific right background, but people that have shown interest in building something and maybe have specific experience in certain careers or companies where the education might make sense. And you guys are all among that group. If you're willing to spend 2 years in searching for one specific privately held company, and that means going all in and trying to send letters, emails, and whatnot to entrepreneurs, typically in their 60s, typically running somewhat old-fashioned service businesses, and say, hey, I'm the son you never had, and really try to back that up, then there's a path to gaining ownership and leadership of one of these businesses. So I didn't understand it at full in the first class. I read a lot about it because this model, a search fund, as part of Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, came from Stanford in the late 80s, an American business school, where there too, professors and investors gave young entrepreneurs the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, maybe these people can actually lead relatively simple service businesses. Well, read about it more. I saw that the average returns were pretty darn decent, and there was a chance at success. Way less chance of unsuccessful or let's say zeros in this model versus startup or VC, right? Where you typically have a few that are stellar, a few that are I'll use a polite word, but imperfect, and a few that are the middle of the road. In search, if as being a part of private equity, the zeros are very minimal, and it's because we buy really decent assets with really high caliber talent. Now, so I thought, hey, this could be something for me. Let's read about the real specifics. So I'll briefly get into what is a search fund, and then I'll tell you what it looks like today and why you should be taking this course. But what is a search fund? After business school, you think about going back to your job or not. You think about wanting to be an entrepreneur. You've decided this is what I want to do. You go out and you try and find one privately held business. But how do you do that? You need money to survive, right? 2 years of salary, a small team of interns, a little office, and some resources to actually get these letters out the door, visit conferences, make sure you're in the face of entrepreneurs with their companies that they've had for the last 30 years. That's what you raise money for. So an average amount today that we're seeing in Europe, because search funds, again, have been active since the 80s, but the last 10 years as an asset class, it has really, really grown, specifically in the US, but the last 2 years in Europe too. Even if I zoom in on the Netherlands, there are 10 traditional search funds right now, and we as investors back them all. But what you do for your search, you find 10 to 20 willing investors to back you, looking for this 400,000 euros. Let's say 20 people put in $20,000 or euros each, right? This finances your 400,000 2-year search program for one privately held company. That means sellers are telling you, oh, I'm not interested. What does this letter mean? This and that. And you're telling them, well, sir or madam, you've built a great company in the cleaning sector. And I'm the son you never had. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the company and eventually take over the business from you. Oh, and by the way, my investors who are financing my search today also have the capital to buy your company. We pay fair multiples, just like any private equity firm might do. But you don't want to sell to a private equity firm, right? You'd be ruining your reputation, financial investors coming in. What happens to the people? What happens to the customer? But you sure as heck don't want to sell the company to a strategic buyer, which would be your competitor that you've been fighting with for the last 10, 20 years. They might rip your name off the wall, and there goes the legacy, all that you don't want. So with all that said, what does a search fund offer? A search fund offers you and the person of the seller taking over his legacy, writing it for the long run, taking care of the people, taking care of the products and services, and maybe enhancing them. What we typically see in search funds is that the current owner entrepreneur is 65 years old, is already with one foot out of the business, spending much time at the golf club, just looking for something like this. Why hasn't he totally left the company yet? Because he cares too much, right? They haven't found the succession solution that the business might deserve. Now, with all that said, that search period is very tough. I experienced this. So right after INSEAD, I moved to New York, set up my search fund there, found 20 willing high net worth individuals willing to back me, and had this $400,000 in an account. And I start to spend it in finding these entrepreneurs and the companies. The long story short is you actually reached out to about 1,000 or more companies in that 2-year period, but there are many, many no's, right? So you zoom in on specific industries with low complexity, with high recurring revenues, high margin businesses, things that first time CEOs, because that's what you're going to become in the business, can't really screw up, right? That's important for us, that the level of the zeros is very minimal. Now, even though it's daunting and you get 999 no's, you only need one yes. Because when an entrepreneur says, hey, I'm interested to learn more, and you have a dinner with them and you explain how the search fund model works, where these investors take a little investment in you in the search, and for that, get the right to participate in the equity that you need to buy the real business, right? So maybe the first investment is 20,000. The second piece that you're going to come back for might actually be 400,000, because now we need 5 to 8 million euros to buy the equity of the company. So typically these are high net worth individuals that know that you might lose your initial 20,000 because the searcher might not find a company. But if he does, you're also generating deal flow for small to medium sized companies where you have a chance to put real money to work and help the searcher succeed. So first phase is the search. Second phase, wow, you actually find a business, you create a deal with the seller, you learn how to involve banks and get debt, right? Because we also put some leverage on the companies. We take bank loans. You put that together with the equity that you're raising now when you go back to your investors, right? The original search fund investors now become the company's investors. And then we put together a deal to buy the company. In my case, I found a security and alarm company. We're in and around New York City. We installed and serviced fire alarms, regular alarms, camera systems, and whatnot. And where the recurring revenue profile came from, when you install these systems, customers always continue to pay for monitoring. We could get good leverage from the bank. I needed to raise some 8-9 million in equity from the investors. And all of a sudden, after all was said and done, 6 months later, I became the CEO, or the succession solution for the seller, to this company. It was called Worldwide Security, even though the company focused on one town in Long Island, but I guess the guy thought bigger of himself. But that was fine. Then what happens in a search? Wow, you've skipped the line. You've become CEO of a small business backed by professional investors. Now what the heck do I do, right? I've never run my own business. What happens? Out of the investor group of the 10, 20 investors, 3 to 4 join a board of directors. And that doesn't mean a controlling board or an investment committee board. A board of directors is a helpful tool, a group of collaborators. These entrepreneurs have pretty high net worth wealth, which means they can spread it and won't be only investing in your search fund, typically do it in more, but they've seen all the things that you're going through, right? And that means that you have 3 to 4 helpers at your beck and call. On the one hand, ultra professionally, because every quarter there's a board meeting that you'd expect, like a board meeting happens in a real big company, right? With financials and controls and executive sessions and all that. But also for the simple questions when things go wrong, things that you can't know. I just bought this company, but we've been doing the true up for the bank, and all of a sudden we learned that the inventory is actually lower than. Hang on one sec. Do you know that the inventory is lower than what we expected? So you run into problems where you need access and help from these investors on the board. And that's where the magic happens here. Even though you're going to run the business for the next 5 to 10 years, you're not in this alone. There's help right around the way and for you to call on whenever you need for business problems. This model helps you into the C-suite quickly, and you're going to get a full run experience. So what happens next? Now you're running a company for 5 to 7 years. We typically grow these companies significantly, as you can read in the Sanford materials. We buy the companies that are not for sale, right? We convince the owners to work with the succession solution that we provide. So it means from a leveraged buyout point of view, and maybe we're not there yet, we bought the companies on the relatively cheap. We know that the owner hasn't been giving his all in terms of energy to grow it the last few years. Now we have your energy to work with. We also have your background to work with, and we have the help of the board to work with. And when you put those ingredients together, it allows for a very fruitful journey to grow this company for the long run. The investors also don't need their money back soon, like most PE funds do, right? They have limited partners. They need a decent return in the next 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7 years. We don't, because each individual company that you find is a new investment in itself. And since you are relatively young, technically we can do this for a very long time. Now, I guess the next question becomes, so what's in it for the searcher? That's important too. So when also say this is not for everyone, you're going to learn that in the class. This is a real trajectory of ups and downs where the averages go up, but there are deep downs. Just think about the responsibilities when you're actively running a company, right? Returns, people at home, investors, problems with employees, legal issues you've never run into. All those kind of topics come into play. And I would say it's not for the faint-hearted. Having said that, the rewards are exceptional. One, you're the CEO. That means you're making a decent salary. I mean, these are small companies, so there's not so much to go around in the early phase, but you are the leader of a business at a very young age, and you get compensated for it. But what we also as search fund investors stimulate is the CEO building up shares. So for no money of your own down, based on the returns that we make for investors, right? How well we grow the company. It's as simple as that. You guys get to participate in the upside. Up to, on average, about 25% of the equity gets granted to the CEO when we hit the average, and they are high, but when we hit average returns in search funds. So, I mean, I'm going to teach you this when we do the class together, and you get a little bit more of a grip on it. But this can lead to exceptional, even generational wealth when done well. And there are many examples of when this has occurred in search. There are also many examples of where, the outcomes were, let's say, mediocre within search, but still life-changing comparison to most jobs in working for an employer. Now, what has happened with search funds? So my experience was really that. So, all of a sudden, 2016, after 2 years of searching, I'm in this seat of the CEO. I've seen many business problems. It was difficult to grow the company until we unleashed some new value creation methods like M&A. I decided to go back to the list of the search funds that I had of the companies that I had searched for in the security industry. And we said, hey, look, 2 years ago, you weren't ready. What about now? We're building something special. Come with us. And search fund investors helped me buy companies again. After the second one, right, where we integrated two businesses, let's say our first company focused on security alarms. The second company we bought focused on fire alarms. And these are, again, boring, old-fashioned services. There's nothing sexy about it. You really need to run a company, regardless of the product it may service. So we started putting these companies together. And over a long period of time, we became a regional player in these alarm systems, buying small companies, adding them together, creating synergies, improving talent, being able to hire more talent, because with new cash flow comes new talent. And we bought these companies from primarily debt and cash on the balance sheet. So I didn't have to go back to the equity investors, which means you can create outsized returns. COVID was a very, very difficult period, as you can imagine, in any business when you're in the leadership seat and you feel like, whoa, everyone might be making money here if we sell the business today, except for me, because even though I can get up to a high percentage, I'm the last in what they call the waterfall, right? The last in the group to get paid if we'd ever sell. And a very long story short, with many ups and downs, it ended very well. We did very well for investors. I got very lucky myself in having built up those shares. And I sold my company 2 years ago to a private equity-backed strategic company. What then typically happens to the searcher after, almost a 10-year run, right? You think about it maybe for 6 months. You search for a company for 2 years. You run a company 5 to 7 years. Then there's an exit. And that exit typically requires the searcher to be involved in some way or form. And maybe that's also fair when you take a lot of money off the table, having put no money down, right? So the investors get off the hook and you typically stay with the buyer for a little bit. That's what happened to me. I just rolled off from there. What we then see, there is more than just one search fund or an acquired company. There is a real search fund community, right? So I just alluded to the Netherlands, where we have maybe 10 search funds now because the word is getting out. We have a professional MBA program that you guys are in touch with, and Erik and I are trying to share the word and spread the word with Wim Hulsing's help and the rest of the team as well, of course. America was leading in this. The last 10 years, it has absolutely exploded, where it was only, in Europe, INSEAD and IES, in America, Stanford and Harvard. This is probably being taught at 20 business schools right now, meaning that more potential searchers in America came out, starting looking for companies. Banks know about it. Sellers know about it. More students know about it, etc. why is it being driven macro-wise? Well, it's because we have a huge group of baby boomers, right, with their privately held companies coming up for sale, with a succession solution issue. And that means that where search funds were kind of hidden under the radar, now we can speak of them as a real asset class, right? And since there's an asset class, it also means there's an ecosystem for selling searchers like me to continue to be in that asset class or in the industry. So I said, why would I go back to this very, very harsh world, for example, private equity, and just buy direct deals and get into companies and fight about the finance, when we have this warm and fuzzy search fund ecosystem where everyone is willing to share, collaborate, go on boards together. You guys can imagine with my experience and specifically the difficulties I've had, now I'm able to help young entrepreneurs starting from scratch. So with my own capital, I invest in many search funds today. I sit on quite some boards when the search fund buys the company, and we try to help the young entrepreneurs grow the business. And of course, in the form of giving back, but also because I like to do it, I teach the course Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition at my old school in Rotterdam and at INSEAD. So this is kind of like an ecosystem where we've learned that about 75% guys like me that went through the whole ETA spectrum, right, from the class to the search to running a company to a successful exit, and then back into the ecosystem, I'm kind of like never going to leave this place. I mean, I love working with young entrepreneurs, teaching and running these businesses, and it's really become a home. And it's the funny thing, I'm telling you guys because I went to this school, right? So I'm probably one of the logical people to talk to about it. But there are many people in the world like me whom I see at conferences at these different business schools. Like both Eric and I were at ESA in Barcelona not long ago, listening to lectures about search, getting key guest speakers about how we can improve, let's say, AI in these small businesses, or how we get to know other investors, or in Eric's case, other professors of these different MBA programs. And it really has become an ecosystem where there's way more than just running a search fund. Now, wrapping up, because I had the first half an hour of this, I think it's fantastic you guys have heard about this class. What we do in the class is we have about 10 sessions where we tell you about what ETA is, give you some test material around, like, and I don't mean tests like physical tests, but ways for you to think about, could this be something for me, right? Do I have entrepreneurial DNA? Do I have experience in a family business? Do I feel I'm a real entrepreneur, but I don't have a golden idea? This could be something for me. And then, am I looking for a fast track to the CEO suite? Because that is what it is, a career change. But am I really, really willing to work for it, right? Put my shoulders under it. Because again, this is not for the faint-hearted. It's really hard work. I will even say when people ask me, would you do it again? I always hesitate at that question, right? And I can't say no because we became very fortunate doing it. And now I have, a life that I choose. I work really hard, but again, in things that I really like to do. If there are people right now in this class thinking, well, I'm doing this MBA, I'm not super in love with my job. I mean, that was me. I actually hated my job, even though it's like, wow, people, I often heard, it must be great at McKinsey. And, there were really great things. I will never talk negatively about the company, but it wasn't for me. Search gave me purpose and something to really dig into and build a career on. So, I don't expect everyone in this class. And what did I just see there? There are 26 participants here. That's really fantastic. And let's see how many join the class. And I think you should, because it's, besides talking about search funds, we do some mock-up, what we call PPMs, or the document that you would present to the investor. We get feedback on it. We have guest speakers, either the CEOs or the investors, right? I rolled out as a CEO. Now I'm an active investor in search funds myself. So I think we're gonna have great interactions. I don't expect everyone to start a search fund or end up in ETA, but I do think that, let's say 10% of the class is actively gonna assess, is this something I want to build the next phase of my career on? And that already is a win for Erasmus, Rotterdam School of Management, that we have a new track, as Eric just talked about, that we're promoting. But I think it's more of a what do you call it? An assessment for you in a new career track, that there's something out there to at least explore. And I'll pause for a second, see if there are questions at this point. But I think the next speaker is way more interesting, because he went into this class. He decided to start a search fund. I'm one of the investors, and a year ago, he may have not have heard of the concept. And he's taking it back to his own country and going all in. So let me pause there because I'm sure this is a lot to digest, and this is just an intro, but really excited to be working with you guys later on. And if you're still on the, should I do this or not? I think it's a class I really would have wanted to take years ago, and I kind of did, even though in a different area, and it wasn't as developed yet. But maybe a couple minutes for some quick questions if they are there, and otherwise we continue, Eric.
Yeah, and let's see whether there are any questions.
You can put your questions in the Q&A part or in the chat, and we'll be happy to relay them to Alexander and Eric.
Okay.
So if there's any questions, maybe I can start with the question, because as you are aware, we have many expats or internationals in our Executive MBA, and I often get the question, well, if I'm based in the Netherlands and I don't speak Dutch, is this a feasible path for me? So what's your view on that? I think Leonardo can talk about that.
That's a really good question. And I think, so first of all, with an investor hat on, we invest globally. That means that search funds work everywhere. The markets are just less tested everywhere, right? There's much data about the US. There's quite some data on Europe as an aggregate. And I spent all last week in Asia working on search funds as well, where there are different yeses and nos. But so it can be done because globally there's a problem around a succession solution need for small businesses, right? Should you pursue it in the Netherlands right after your Dutch MBA if you're not from there? I would say it's possible, but it's likely more difficult, right? In the end, what we're looking for here, what you are looking for when you create your documents and you go out and find business owners to talk to about succeeding their business, right? You're also looking for a click, and that's just the truth of it all. I think at least 1 in 2 owners don't care what the nationality is of their potential successor. It's typically the more worldly view to say, hey, do I care if I'm a Dutchman, if my successor is English, Indian, or anywhere from? Maybe it doesn't matter, but for some it might, right? It is easier to create a click when you have the same cultural background, ranging from jokes to what we might eat or think versus not. So I would say, on average, it might be more difficult doing this in your non-home country versus your home country. That doesn't mean you can't, but I think someone you're going to listen to later on had that discussion, made a decision, and decided to go back to Brazil to pursue a search there.
And we also seem to be having some questions coming through, so I can maybe perhaps read them out for you. The first,
please.
Leo says, thanks for the presentation. Is it frequent to acquire a company and fail? What happens then? And he says, thanks.
Yeah, good question. So during the class, we're going to show you all this data, and lots of the data is around the search itself, right? So there are a couple of phases. Either you don't find your investors to even start the search. Secondly, you don't find a company, and a little bit over 1/3, but let's call it 1/3, doesn't find a company. So the other side of it is that's a 2/3 chance you actually find a business, pretty high success rate. Then when you go into the company, there are some, and we have to dig into the percentages because they really change. It's become so active now, that don't find companies. It's the smaller percentage, right? So there is a really good chance when you actually find a business that you're going to run it well and create a positive return. The question is it an outsized return? How far does it go? That we don't know beforehand. But yeah, there are also companies that don't return money to their investors.
Perfect. We have another question as well from Asterios. What do you think about the ethical aspect of ETA? Do you think this can create actual value to local communities?
That's a difficult and a broad question, but in the end, you are in charge of what you buy and where you might find it, right? So your PPM, the document that you discuss with your investors, this is where I'm going to look for them. This is where I have experience. This is what I want to do, has become more thoughtful about those kind of topics than before. I'll give you an example. There are many searchers looking for more green type products than in the past, like solar panel companies, right? Heat pumps, that sort of thing, specifically in the Netherlands. So I'm not sure if that's helping local communities, but we are saying that we're not just looking for, only financial.
Oh, Alexander, you're on mute now.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure how much you heard, but I'm not sure if I know concrete examples where we help local communities. I mean, these are for-profit businesses, not NGOs, but I do think there's a trend of thinking more about communities or the climate, because we're seeing many searchers looking for things like, maybe you did just hear this, but heat pumps, solar panels, that sort of thing.
Perfect. We've got 2 more questions. I hope we have time for that at least. But
Yeah,
Daniel
that's fine.
asked, said it's really insightful. Thanks, Alexander. Sounds really exciting and a great way to quickly earn stripes and leapfrog career-wise. His question is, how would you advise getting started in terms of early steps, finding investors, and kicking off a search? Now, of course, I think some of this will be covered during the ETA trajectory, but perhaps you'd like to go ahead and give Daniel a bit of advice.
Yeah, this is a big and a broad question, of course, but of course, my first answer would be take the course. but no, it's there is a lot of research online today because the community has really evolved. If you just Google Search Fund or something called the Stanford Primer, which is a document where we compile all returns, research, which searchers started, which didn't, you'll be seeing a lot that you can do in prep in terms of read up about investors, even ourselves, or which events are going on in the community, where can I visit conferences to learn a little more. There's a lot online. I would start there, and then you really want to dig in to see if it's something for you, but we can talk about that more offline.
Perfect. And then Voucher says, hi, Alexander, energizing pitch, thanks. What does the balance look like in terms of number of companies looking for succession versus searchers?
Yeah, there are still good question. Way many companies that have succession problems versus searchers out there. So if you think like, shoot, am I going to do that? Is there enough market size? Absolutely. The difference with 10 years ago is there were less searchers out there, meaning I had way more trouble explaining to owners what this actually was. Like that I'm this one-man show backed by some capital. Like, is the money really there? Can I convince them that I might, be willing to learn and be able to do this? Those were big topics. I think in you guys' case, more owners might know about that this is a valid model for their succession, right? For them to sell their company and have a real, successful exit in terms of monetary, but also in terms of what might come into the business next, meaning you. So there's less of an education path that you need to go through. But there's also more competition in the sense of there are more searchers out there. Having said that, there's way more than enough market size for you to make a calculated risk bet on your career and wanting to do this. We can talk about that in way more detail in class, clearly.
Great, and just to let everyone know, you can continue to put your questions in the Q&A section. Even if Alexander isn't able to take any more, then of course you can, Eric and Leonardo will be happy to answer them as well. Yeah,
I have to jump, guys. And this was indeed just a pitch for the class. There's much more to talk about. Feel free to also email me directly or ask for the details of the people at Erasmus here. I think we're going to hear from Leo and then back from Eric too. But I really encourage you to take the class if this is intriguing and you want a little bit learn a little more, because often do we get a comment or a question, something about, okay, so like, what's the catch? Well, there honestly actually is none. It's just tough. Like, do you want to go for this? You don't have to decide now. Take 10 of these lectures and think about it. I'm sure Leonardo will underscore that too. There are many downs you go through, but even regardless of the money, the rewarding piece is leadership of something of your own, right? You're in charge during the search phase, right? You're running a small company in just little factory trying to find a business, but also after that, you're running a small business with real people where you get all the reins and responsibilities that come with it, the good and the bad. So it's a very special trajectory you need to at least consider. That'd be my going away pitch here.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alexander. It's very good to hear this from someone who's actually done it and who will be teaching the elective course, so to already meet you. So I know you have to go, so thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a good day and good luck with the rest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.
And
bye-bye.
Then we will move on from someone who has already done it to someone who's just at the start of it, and that's Leonardo Palou, who was in our Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition track this year, and actually is an active searcher now. Could I say that, Leonardo? Or please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. So not sure if it's going to be more interesting than Alex talk, like he said, but I'll try my best. So my name is Leonardo. I'm Brazilian. I used to live in the Netherlands, and I started my MBA course last year. So my career, I was in corporate, like very different from Alex. I graduated in chemical engineering, and I started in corporate on a sales position in a manufacturing company. It was a Brazilian company, but I used to work in Germany. I worked 13 years for that company. It was 8 of them in Germany, 6 of them in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. And after those 13 years, I decided to leave the company to pursue something else. And that's when I started my MBA, looking for my next corporate job. That was what was on my mind. And I think that was September last year, and right at the first month, there was this extracurricular activity that they send an email that would be a Friday afternoon and say, hey, there's a way to become a CEO. I was unemployed, doing nothing on a Friday afternoon. I say, okay, I go to campus. I see what that's about. And that was the first talk from Alexander that was explaining the ETA model. So I got to know Alexander then, and just as he said, like, if he wasn't doing that last year, I would never heard about that, because it's still a very niche. Although it exploded in the past few years, and if you see from the numbers it exploded from a very small base. So it's still a very niche thing, right? But yeah, although I was in this talk from Alexander, I think I probably heard probably a lot of the doubts that you guys have, like, hey, how do I start? Like, how do you find investors? How do you actually do this stuff? Like, it sounds great, but I don't have a rich uncle to back me up. So how do I get the money for that, right? But anyway, in that talk, there was one searcher that was working for Alex now, was backed by Alex, and they had this fund in Amsterdam. I got to talk to him. The following week, I was doing an internship for him, and then I started my internship in a search fund. I got to know the model, and then he presented me to another investor, and that investor presented me to another searcher. And just as Alexander said, it's a very tight community. It's very fuzzy and warm, and like everybody knows everybody, and everybody talks to everybody, and it's a very collaborative community as well. So I think that's also, after I got to know that, is one of the things that attract me the most to that, is this really community. Yeah. So I got to start talking to searchers, and I think everyone that I talked to, I got more and more in love with the model. And I spent probably 4 or 5 months thinking about that. And I think in January or February, I took the decision, okay, that's what I'm going to do. That's going to be my life. That's going to be my career, right? Had a pretty good talk with my wife, because we were still living in the Netherlands back then. And I've been talking to investors, and I think that exactly that question that Eric posed, like, can I do that in the Netherlands? And yeah, first, I didn't really want to do it in the Netherlands. I think both me and my wife wanted to go out of the Netherlands by then. I want to go somewhere sunnier, but we're still thinking about Europe. So we're thinking probably like south of Spain or Portugal, because it would be a lot easier with the language. But I've been talking to investors, and they said, yeah, like, even though you speak the language, it's not the same culture, so you might have some difficulties. Like, if you'd go back to Brazil, it's a lot easier, just like Alex said. So in the end, I'm Brazilian. I like Brazil. I had the idea to go back to Brazil, and then we took the decision, okay, we're going back to Brazil. And that's what we did last July. So I'm now in Brazil for the past 4 months. I'm still doing my MBA in Rotterdam, so I'm flying back to Rotterdam in 2 weeks to go for my classes. But I came back to Brazil for the search fund. Like that one talk in the Friday afternoon really changed my life, changed my career. Right. The ETA track, I think, was so that first talk was on my correct me, Eric, but on my mind was looking like, hey, RSM was testing the waters to see if it sticks, and it did stick. And then they developed the track, and the track was, from my view, was a wonderful thing. They developed some workshops that we did on the first half of the year. So some like was extra time workshops. On those workshops, they kind of presented the whole side of it. So we heard from searchers that were doing that. We heard from an investor, so that we also got the investor point of view. We heard from someone that already bought a business, was a self-funded model, so a little bit different, but still ETA. And we also heard from lawyers that were talking a little bit of how it works in the Netherlands, and like things that you never thought about. So they were very nice, introductory talks to our ETA track. And then we got for real on the class on September or October. Was supposed to be one of our electives, but we got as an extra class, which is better, I think. And I think the class from Alexander was, very well taught, and I think it really helped me so I was already doing that for 1 year, like really digging deep in the model, right? So some of the stuff was I already seen that, but a lot of it I wasn't aware yet. And he also bought he knows everybody there, so he brought a lot of searchers to talk to. He brought people that already bought the company. He brought people, other investors. So he brought a lot of guest speakers that really add to the track. So it was not just him speaking, right? So we had this very rounded, and he goes through every step of the way, and like what are the challenges of each step? How do you think about that? How do you solve that? And it was a very interactive session as well. So really helping us to think it through. And in the end, we had to develop this PPM, which is the first document when we're going to pitch. And we already get some feedback from them. So we had the chance of developing that PPM together with one investor and already get a very honest feedback from investors. Say, hey, maybe you should think about this. Maybe you could improve that. So I think that helps a lot. For me, the PPM didn't help because I was already fundraising for about 7 months. So I was not going to change my PPM. But it did. So I think in the end, for the others that were not jumping gun like I did, that normally waiting for the end of the MBA, I think it was very helpful. And talking to the other colleagues in the class, they were very glad. And I see a lot of them that are really considering and taking it forward with the search fund idea that they're going to do it. Either as a traditional search fund, that is the model that Alex had with investors backing you up, or on the self-funded where you just self-fund it yourself and look for the company and you get investors when you found the company. So it's a similar model, right? So I see that as a very successful track since you get so much interest. And I think just as Alex said, it was also challenging for us to say, hey, is this something for you? Because when you look at the numbers and when you look at the rewards of it, it's very easy to think, hey, yeah, I want to be a CEO. Hey, yeah, I want to get some $1 million at the end, right? Like I want to be rich. Like who doesn't, right? But it does have a big, big cost. It's not for everyone. It's a risky thing. You need to be aware of that. So he said, yeah, like 30% don't get a company. What happens then? Well, for the searcher, it happens that you are unemployed again. Yeah. So, or what happens if you fail business? So again, for the searcher means that you work for 7 years and you are again unemployed and you didn't get the big paycheck at the end. So there are some risks, but the rewards, in my opinion, are much bigger than the risks. Still, like now I'm fundraising for about 8 or 9 months, meaning that I'm talking to investors all the time. And now I'm closing, so I'm closing my fund. I'm starting January, really searching. I already start searching. I'm starting January. But for a lot of the time was always the insecurity, the anxiety of, hey, am I really going to manage that? Am I really going to find out investors? And now in January, I'm starting my next step, which will be searching for the company. And that will be 2 years of anxiety of, hey, am I really going to find a business? Am I really going to do that? And then probably after that, talking to all the CEOs, like, yeah, like after 6 years and you sell the business for a lot of money, it's all smiles. But during those 6 years, it's also a lot of, hey, it's like, am I going to make it through tomorrow? You're talking about small businesses again. So sometimes they're like shifts or changes that can just like wipe her business clean. There is a risk on small business on that. So you need always to especially in the beginning, like, hey, do I have enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month? Those are some concerns that you need to do. So you need to be aware of this uncertainty level that never goes away, and you need to be aware of yourself. Like, are you okay with that? So I think self-awareness is very important, that you think it through. that you don't just think on the rewards, that you think about all the challenges that you have to go through. Searching is drilling, you know, it's sending 1,000 emails. Sending 1,000 of emails sounds something, but when your whole day for months on end is just getting on an Excel list, find a business name, find an email, and writing the same email that you already wrote 1,000 times to the business owner, that most of the times you don't even get a reply, it gets, you know, a little bit disappointing and frustrating afterwards. So you need to be aware of that. Okay, I sent 1,000 emails and it still didn't work, but the next one is going to work. You need to have this optimism, like Alexander said. You're going to have 999 no's to get the one yes. So I think that this is kind of the flip side. Still, I kind of fell in love with the idea, and the more that I learn about it, the more that I like it. I talked to you, so to prepare myself, I think one of the questions is, how do you start? I would say that just like Alex said, research. I think that's a very good first step. You have the YESI and the Stanford studies that gets all the statistics. And right after reading that, start talking to people, you know, talk to the searchers, talk to the investors, talk to the guys that are doing the CEOs. So the searchers are the most important. Talk to the guys that did the search and didn't work out. That the guys that bought a company, that the guys that sold the company, the guys that sold the company and failed, the guys that sold the company and got rich, the guys that are in it. So you talk to all phases, and you hear all different stories. And like everybody's going to tell you something new, something different. So you talk to 20, 30, 40 of them. And at some time you start to create your own opinion of it. So talk to like as much people as you can so that you learn more and more about the business. And at the same time, I think start reflecting on yourself. Like, hey, what are my strong points? What are my weaknesses? What do I need to learn, and so on, so that you get ready. I think that will be the first step. And then like finding investors sounds like very daunting thing, but once you're in the community, there are like a lot of investors in the community. So, you know, and they are very open. Again, it's a very open community, and you just go on and talk to them, and that's it. There's no secret in that. So as soon as you're prepared for that, as soon as you're ready for that, you can just go on and talk to them, and they are open for that, and they give you advice and they help you out. And I think I'm about on my time, right?
Well, I see there's a question as well, so maybe.
Yeah, so we have our first question from Edwin. He says, "Hi, Leonardo. Thank you for all the information. You and Alexander talk about a lot of years. I'm currently 40 and was wondering if you're willing to share what's your age. Do you know what age Alexander started? What do you think about age, and would that be a benefit or not to be older or younger in the situation?"
Yeah, so I'm currently 37. And if you look at the statistics, most of the average is like 31 or 32. I'm not sure what age Alexander started, but I think it was a little bit younger than me. But I think there's for everyone. I think in Brazil, the average age is 36 or 37, so it's a little bit older than the average. And there's a searcher that started in Brazil this year that's 46, and another one that's 50 something, I think 52 or 53. So, you know, I think there's space for everyone. Investors might have different opinions. There are investors that like people that are older and more experienced. There are investors that like younger people because that's the traditional model. So you kind of get everything. I see a benefit of being older, that you have more experience, you have more to add. In the end, I see that. Like one investor in Brazil created a model specific for older searchers. So they called the senior searcher program. So I think there are a lot of benefits to being a little bit older. It's just like, I think for yourself, do you see yourself doing that? It's like a 10 years thing. Like, do you see yourself doing that? If the answer is yes, I don't see why not.
Okay. More questions? Not at the moment, I think. So, Leonardo, thank you very much for your insights in the program. And I think for the last few minutes, I just briefly want to share my screen and go into a bit more of the practicalities of the track and what it involves.
Yeah. So thank you, guys. Thank you for the talk. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn and talk further if you're interested. So great hearing from you guys, and like good luck on your track. I think it's a wonderful thing that RSM is doing. I really like my MBA program as a whole on the track. So I really advise you to do that. So thank you, guys, and hope to see you next year.
Yeah, I hope to see you in 2 weeks, Leonardo.
I will. I'll be there.
Okay.
See you
Cheers.
guys.
Okay, let me share my screen. Oh, I can't share, then I need your help, Caroline, to share because I'm not allowed to.
Sure, give me 1 second. Okay, should be fine to share now.
All right. Good. Then I'll share the presentation. Wait, get to the top. Can everyone see this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's all visible.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is just briefly talk about what the track involves. First of all, it's an extracurricular track, except for the elective, which is next year will be a normal elective out of the 4 electives that you can choose. The rest of the program is extracurricular, so it's completely optional. There's no additional cost involved for this program, so it's just something that we offer and that you can take advantage of. How does it work in terms of the time that you have to invest? Well, the workshops that we will have we will have 3 workshops in the first half year during the foundation courses, and then we have another 2 workshops 1 year later during the advanced courses. The workshops are between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock on Fridays, when the EMBA students are already on campus. So it's you just arrive a bit early. If you're in a global executive MBA, it's different because then it's typically on a different weekend. But for executive MBA students, it just means that you arrive a few hours earlier and you can attend the workshops. Leonardo already alluded to it. There will be alluded to the topics of the workshops. So the first one is about getting started, then experiences of first-time entrepreneurs. We have investors that share their perspectives. We look at value creation and an entrepreneurial skill set. Each of them are 2-hour workshops. The elective is the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition elective, and as Alexander made clear, he'll be teaching it together with other faculty. And this will really be a deep dive into the process and what you need to do to start as a searcher. And like Leonardo, some students already start during the Executive MBA with fundraising, so with finding investors. Most students will actually start this after they have graduated, but both is possible. If you really enter into the search phase, then it's important that that is actually a full-time job, so you need to have enough time available. What we also offer is exposure to search funds. It is possible for your in-company project to take a search fund or an entrepreneurship to acquisition trajectory as one of the topics or the topic of your in-company project. So that may be combined also with an internship at a search fund. A lot of the search funds in the Netherlands, but internationally, like some help in their search phase, and they typically use current executive MBA students. Now, the last thing that we are doing, and this is something that is still under development because we just started this year with the track, but we want to build an Entrepreneurship to Acquisition hub. And we already see this taking form because we see more and more investors like Alexander becoming interested in RSM as a source of potential searchers. So we have good relationships with a number of investors. But also the warm and fuzzy search community learns how to find RSM. So we are building something up. We want to involve students in that as well, in terms of setting up a club and taking initiatives, for example, to organize a conference about ETA. So that is the logistics of the track. Let me now see whether I can stop here. That's what it involves if you enter into this track. If you want to join this track, though, then you have to be part of the Executive MBA, of course. The only thing that we ask is that you register at the start of the MBA that you want to be involved in this, and that means that you will have a guaranteed seat in the elective. It's also possible not to register, then you can join the workshops, but then we cannot guarantee the seat in the elective. But that's probably something to think about in a later stage. At this point, I hope that we've been able to answer your questions and give you an overview of what ETA involves. Of course, you probably have many more questions, but in the track, I'm sure that we will cover all of those. If you have any additional questions, I think we are now towards the end of this session, but if you have any additional questions, please reach out to me, to Alexander, or to Caroline for that matter, and we will be happy to answer them.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric, so much for this. I think it was a really nice, insightful overview into what ETA is and what it can be for you. So thank you all as well for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, and have a good day.